Hello and welcome to the Women Today podcast, and look back at some of the highlights of the past 5 days. We've met some incredible people this week, including the psychiatrist to the stars, Dr. Raj Persaud, and Super Cycling Man. And with Kate away, we were also joined by a blast from Manx Radio's past.
Oh dear.
Those were the days.
They certainly were, my word.
Our guest today is someone very familiar with these studios, although it has been a while, Susie Richardson.
It has, and things have changed somewhat. Unfortunately, I still sound as if I'm talking from a pit, but I'm going to see an ENT person on Monday, so I'm told, well, I'll probably actually have my nose amputated, I think, the way things are going. It looks fab, though, I have to say, yeah.
When did you leave Manx Radio? What was it, 2004?
I think it was 2004, yeah.
Gosh.
They took me out screaming and shouting and, I went quietly.
So just tell us, how did you first get into radio?
Well, actually, Mummy decided that I would be okay on the radio. She decided for me, so she wrote in when they were asking for someone to do the programme. Louise, in fact, was going on to greener fields, and so Mother sent off an application for me, very kindly, really. I wasn't very pleased at the time, but I actually was afterwards, because I wouldn't have had the bottle to do it, and it worked out fine 32 years later.
32-year career, I suppose it'd be difficult to pinpoint, but I just wonder, what was your most memorable on-air moment?
You mean, what did my listener do to deserve 32 years of me? Hard to pinpoint, really, but, there were so many happy moments, so many. Oh dear, how long have you got?
While you're just thinking, can I just say something here, Susie?
I think you haven't remembered something.
I can remember lots of fun and having lots of fun in the studio. But what I was just going to say is that the instant that you started to play that music, Beth, we all went, "Oh yes!" And I think that 2004 to today is a fair step of time. And I think that it's a reflection of how much affection that the listeners had for you. It wasn't about individual things that you did. It was just you were so much a part of people's lives and they loved you to bits. And that's why you can, several years on, you can play that music and everyone's, "Oh, yes." And they're all set to ring up and offer you washing powder and nappies and, and tell you that there's a ferret's run up the drain pipe and all those kind of things that made it great radio.
I know when
the five is yours.
I know when I used to listen, I used to find it really comforting, actually, whenever I heard Susie on the radio. It was just a really lovely coming home for me, actually.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think local radio was a completely different beast 32 years ago. Yeah. And people who were on it really were like celebrities. And I wonder what that aspect of life was like for you, going around and being recognised, if not for your face, certainly for your voice.
Well, it was always, curious if somebody actually did recognise me, and it didn't happen very often. I remember one lady coming up to me and saying, "Oh, you're on the radio, aren't you?" I said, as you do. "Yes, that's right." She said, "Oh dear," walked off.
Similar kind of thing. Lady looked at me. "Oh, I've heard you on the radio." And so I'm going this is, perhaps there's a compliment coming here. Pride goeth before a fall, my grandma always used to say.
Every time.
And she looked at me long and hard and she said, "Do you know, you sound a lot taller on the radio." But we love it. When neither of us saying these things in any way, you love it. And this is why it works and why community radio on this island is completely different. And I said this, when it was our anniversary year, that we wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for the people. It's not about us. It's about the people and the way the people support us and engage with us. That's what this station is about.
Yes, I think Manx people generally aren't over effusive, I love that, actually. It's really nice.
Well, talking about community and something Jude's already referred to at the swap shop, it's gone down in Manx Radio legend. I'm sure there are those who would love to see it make a comeback. What is the most bizarre swap you can remember?
Oh, look, I can't remember, really. There was that many.
I think I remember
really.
Quite a few of them.
Some of them were pretty hideous, weren't they?
You remember them because they were yours, Beth, weren't they?
The nappies. There's lots of nappies.
Loads of nappies and things.
Yeah. Washing machines, old cars.
Famous for nappies and soap.
Any livestock? I think you had the odd live animal.
No, I put my foot down on that one. No, you're not allowed to do that.
Were you allowed to swap cars? I don't remember.
Kids.
Yeah, there's a few. I think.
Do you think maybe we need to pull? Do you think we maybe need to pull this one back, girls? Do you think?
Just on, I suppose, on a more serious note, in 32 years, I wonder if you saw the role of women in broadcasting change at all.
Very much so, yeah.
In what way?
Well, I think it had to, really. Well, there was me and Jude and Geraldine, I think, and that was it, wasn't it, really? And I mean, that was it for years and years and years.
I think if we look back through, if you drew up a list of presenters, you would find that there would be. I mean, that you're taking a snapshot of when it was, but you'd been here for
so long.
Well, no, but you've been here well established. You were well established when I was privileged to come out to play. But I think if you look back over the 50 years, you will find there's always been a proportion of women on staff, but it's always been a smaller ratio. And I was told from a national statistic that the listener overall prefers a male voice on radio. Now, I don't know whether that would, but it was just a statistic I was once given.
It's a shame on our show then, isn't it?
I am attempting to break a record for the first person to cycle across all 7 continents. So loads of people have cycled around the world. There are probably hundreds doing it right now, and anyone listening to this show could cycle around the world if they wanted to. And I'd really recommend it. It's a great way to travel. But no one has done all 7 continents before. People have done 5, 6. Someone's even cycled to the South Pole before, but no one's ever strung together all 7. So I thought it was a great way to do something unique and a good way of raising a lot. I'm trying to raise £100,000 for Parkinson's UK and 5 other charities. And shameless plug, people can donate on supercyclingman.com and just follow the adventure would be great because it's a load of fun to follow.
Okay, how much stuff do you need to take with you to cycle around the world?
My entire life is now squeezed into 6 small bags that hang off different parts of my bike. So there's 3 bags on the front and 3 bags on the back. But that's it. It's a very, very simple lifestyle that I've now got, and you'll be glad to hear I've got 1 change of superhero costume.
That was my next question.
They are being washed, don't worry, and there's a strict rotation policy in action, and I've even got a sort of evening casual version for just meals out at a local curry house.
Does it glow in the dark?
Yes, he said, lying. I wish you've given me an idea. Anyone can make a glow in the dark casual night gear costume for me, please. Get in touch on supercyclingman@gmail.com.
You obviously are going to need a little bit of time off work for doing this.
Yeah, it's more than a sabbatical. So I think it's 5 years on the road, visiting as many schools as want to have a man in his pants and cape come and visit them, to get kids excited about cycling, to get them learning about all the geography, all the countries around the world, sticking pins in maps. Learning languages. There's so many kind of fun and educational parts to this trip, and it's just great if people can get involved with it.
And how far have you gone in terms of planning exactly where you're going to go? Where do you sleep, for example?
I use the power of the internet to help me find place to stay. So I've put a map for my next few weeks around Britain and Ireland up on Facebook, and people go, oh, I know someone in the Lake District, I know someone in Glasgow, they can help you out. But the way the Isle of Man accommodation worked out was just hilarious. A teacher at Belfast sent a message to some local teacher here, and then they put me on Free Cycle, of all places, saying, can you imagine that? I'm being free cycled like an object. Can you help this man, stroke object, find a place to stay for 2 nights? And I stayed in a lovely place, very near Fairy Bridge, just on someone's lawn. But they made a little campfire for me. They invited me in for cups of tea and a shower, and that's all I need. Just a very, just little things make a big, big difference to how I feel each day. And someone in the coffee corner just gave me a couple of bananas. It's only a small thing, but to me, when I'm pretty tired, like I tried to race around the TT track yesterday. I did it in 2 hours 19. I hope that's a good time. So anyone can beat that. I'll be very impressed.
It's amazing what you'll get given, though, if you're wearing a cape, I guess. And you've said this is going to take you around 5 years. I mean, that's an awful long time to be away from friends and family. You're doing it all at once?
I'm going to do hopefully the first 6 continents in the first 3.5 years. This is getting very precise now. Then I'm going to go home for a year, and basically I've got to get ready for Antarctica then. So that's going to require a lot of specialist training in sort of super cold, like -30 conditions, and changing my bike into a thing called a fat bike, which has got very fat tyres and metal spikes going through it. So actually, the 5-year adventure is broken into 3.5 years, a year rest, lots of cups of tea and cake at home, and getting some warm kit and doing training for Antarctica. And then Antarctica will be 1 month in December in the future, because there's only that 1 month window of trying to go to the South Pole and to the edge of Antarctica.
And presumably there are going to be some areas that you go through which may not be all that safe, I guess. You have to know exactly where you're going and what to expect.
Yeah, one of the schools I visited during my 2-day stay here, Balasala School, they're studying deadly and dangerous at the moment is one of their topics, and they've tied Super Cycling Man's trip around the world with deadly and dangerous. I really hope that nothing deadly and dangerous is going to happen during these 5 years, but there are going to be some very deadly and dangerous insects, animals, weather conditions, political situations that I come across. But actually, one country I have visited fairly recently, Iran, was on the kind of, the travel blacklist of, don't go there. But I saw some guy's video called Jamie McDonald, who'd cycled through there recently, saw that he was okay, and just thought, if he can do it, I can do it. And it was the friendliest country of them all. So I think you just got to use a bit of common sense. And, I'm avoiding war zones, but I'm trying to be adventurous and go through some pretty exotic and interesting places.
Deadly and dangerous sounds almost like an arch enemy of yours.
I definitely hope I don't come across him or her on the way. I'd much rather find Super Cycling Woman.
Just imagine what it would be like to have no access to hygienic sanitary products. It's something that happens all too often, leading to considerable problems for many young girls. Well, at the Philip Christian Centre in Peel from 10:30 tomorrow morning, there's a chance to find out more about a charity called Days for Girls, which has been set up to help. And I've been speaking to local volunteer Hannah Grove to find out more.
It's a charity that was set up in Australia by a lady who works with orphans in Africa. And what they were finding was that especially the young girls, when they started to go through puberty, they were all dropping out of school. Because they didn't have any way to manage their feminine issues that they were going through. No education and no practical ways to deal with it. So without going into too much detail, they were sort of using really unhygienic ways of dealing with it, like rocks or ash or rags, and then getting infected, and it was a big issue. So to keep the girls in education, they were trying to come up with a way of managing the issue. So they created a washable, reusable sanitary towel, in essence, so the girls can take them, wear them, and they get washed out, because obviously they have no way of disposing of the ones that we use over here. So they get washed out, and then they can reuse them month by month. So each pack that the girl receives has 8 in it, and so they just cycle through them, washing them out, reusing them, and that pack lasts for about 3 years. So they're just trying basically to get as many girls out there with a pack each. And along with that pack comes the education as well. As each girl receives their pack, they get taught how to use it, how to stay hygienic, and all about birth control and stuff as well. So we're just trying to get as many out as we can, but they take a long time to make.
So how did you get involved in this?
There's a lady I know on Ireland called Pat Wiles. She started up a charity called DO, so that's Developing Orphans, which is based in Uganda. And she helps child-headed families out there. So that's children that have lost their parents, and the older child is bringing up the younger children. So she started that up, and that's now got a school. And she wants to use that as an opportunity to get these packs out to the young girls that she knows out there. So along with providing them with goats and chickens and their own house and an education, she's also sort of branching out to that. So I met her, and she said, "Oh, you like to sew, is this something that we can do?" And we thought, I guess so. And then so it just sort of escalated, really.
So you say they take quite a long time to make, these reusable sanitary towels. How do you make them? What sort of material are you using?
Okay, so it comes with sort of a holder, if you will. and that's made of cotton. So it's 2 layers of cotton. It's got little pockets in it, and in between the 2 layers of cotton is a fabric called PUL. Not sure what that stands for, but it's like a waterproof fabric. So that goes in the middle of the cotton. And then they have sort of the flannelette pads that then get tucked into the pockets of the holder. So it's quite bulky, and I think I personally wouldn't like to use one, but considering what their other options are, they're absolutely thankful for them. So they get 8 of the flannelette pads that get tucked in, and that's what's washable. And then the holder is what gets strapped into the underwear. So the holder's quite the difficult bit because it's got poppers and pockets and all sorts of things. But the flannelette pads are quite easy. They're just a square of fabric.
And tomorrow you are going to be talking to people about this organisation, because it's doing incredible work for something that most women over here really do take for granted.
Yeah, it's hard because I think I see a lot of things on Facebook at the moment of people are getting really annoyed because our products over here get taxed. I don't know if you've seen it, and everyone's up in arms about how much tax they have to pay for sanitary products for women. And I think, oh my goodness, I'd rather pay a little bit of tax for what we have than what they have out there. So really, we're just trying to raise awareness and get a lot of people a bit more knowledgeable about how lucky we are, and hopefully some funding to send out more packs. And even if other people want to volunteer to help us make them, that would be great.
And how many people have you got making them at the moment?
Probably between 12 and 15, I think, depending on what people's skills are. Some people aren't that confident with their sewing machines, so they just like to do the folding or the turning inside out or the sort of stitching down one side or little things like that. And all the fabric needs to be ironed and sort of cut out. The cutting out process takes forever, so there's a little bit of something for everyone. If anyone wants to come take part, then we'll find you a job.
And is this something that's done in an organised event kind of way, or do people do it in their own time?
The last ones we did, we all sort of took home and did bits and pieces as we could, but we found that wasn't providing like a consistent pattern through all of them. So this time round, we've tried to do it on organised mornings so that we're all there. So everyone's doing the cutting out and everyone's doing it identical so that we can sort of, sounds funny, but create a better product for the girls out there, really. We want them to be really high quality so that they last for longer. So at the moment we've been working from Broadway Baptist Church. They've got the Well coffee shop, which has huge tables, so we've been using the huge tables for all the cutting and the material.
It is Real Nappy Week, and our guests today are going to convince us why we should be going down the reusable route, if we have babies, obviously. Nikki Hockaday and Samantha Hurd are from the Isle of Man Cloth Nappy Network and Library. Samantha, just tell me first of all how you started using cloth nappies for your children.
I bought a couple of cloth nappies for my son when I was pregnant, and because I like the idea and I like the idea of saving money, so I bought a couple just for £5, and they sat there, and he was born, and I kind of got a bit overwhelmed by everything that was that came with newborns that I didn't really expect. And then about a year into it, and felt very guilty that I hadn't actually used them, we ran out of disposable nappies one day, and I put them on him, and I'm not sure what I expected to go wrong. I expected it to be horrific, and it wasn't. And it was like, oh, actually, this isn't that bad. You know, I don't know why I thought it would be so terrible. And so I did a little bit looking online, and I thought, God, I can actually save quite a lot of money here. And so then when my daughter was born 7 months ago, we used them from the start with her. And I use a mixture of disposables because I like the convenience that sometimes comes with disposables, and I use cloth. And so I like the fact that with 2 children, I've saved a lot of money. And you know, whether I have any more children, I'll hopefully save some more.
Nikki, how did you get into it?
I started soon after my son was born. I was sort of looking at it and seeing the amount of waste that one small child was producing and the cost of it all as well. So I happened just to buy a few and then sort of tried it from there. And I started when he was about 6 weeks old, and then it sort of grew from there.
Okay, well, I'm going to be honest. I'm afraid I have used disposables for all 3 of my children, apart from when I was in the Jane, and, you know, the reusables were very kindly taken away and washed for me. That was my main thought, that really they're just not that convenient.
I think a lot of people have this idea that you might have to soak them and things like that, but because we have access to brilliant modern washing machines, really it's a case of storing them in a bucket and then when you're ready to do a wash load, put them in the wash. You press the button to go on pre-wash, and then you press the button to do a 60-degree wash, and that is it. So it's not really terribly labour intensive, and because you've got things like wet bags and mesh bags that go inside the buckets, you don't have to touch them. So it's not even really very dirty. It's just a case of every couple of days you've got an extra wash load, which I haven't found that difficult to fit into my life, and I'm quite disorganised.
But couldn't it be argued, though, that extra wash load and that extra washing from an environmental point of view is just as bad as using disposables?
There's been a lot of research into that. Go Real have looked into it. There's the amount of electricity that you need to just heat the washing to 60 degrees is really not that much. It's about 30p to do a wash load. Over the course of a year, including the cost of detergent, it's £42. So, and the thing as well is, when you're looking at disposable nappies, you're not just looking at the disposal of it, you're also looking at the water that's used to create them, the wood pulp that's used to create them, the transport to take them to the retailers and for you to buy them. So it's not even a simple case of looking at the waste versus the washing. You're actually looking at the whole life cycle of the disposable nappy. And so even with the washing and even with tumble drying, it is still kinder on the environment to use cloth nappies.
I'm getting more convinced, but then Nikki, tell me about the leaking issue, because I see the disposable nappy adverts. They promise all sorts of things, including a dry night. How do cloth nappies compare on that front?
They're just as good, if not better. You've got sort of more containment, more elastic on them than what you would do disposables, so they tend to hold more. You've got different fibres that you can have in different nappies, so they're better for different things.
And I think the interesting thing is there are so many different types now, because I've often thought about cloth reusable nappies as being really, really bulky, and that was just the only sort of type you could get. But just tell me about the Cloth Nappy Network, Nikki, because this is something you set up. How did that come about?
It came about after I sort of had my son and we started using cloths, I was sort of getting asked by more and more people, oh, can you just tell me a bit about them? Can I try some? Can I do this? So I eventually started up doing some advising, and then I went sort of the library grew from there, and we sort of help lots of people now.
I mean, so the library, the idea is that people can come to you and say, I want to try it. You give them a 4-week trial pack, and they can...
Yeah, it's about a month. We have a trial pack. They have a different amount, roughly about 10 to 12 nappies in sort of our older kits, more for a newborn. We have enough for a full-time kit for our newborn kits.
And how do people find out about or where they can get in touch with you?
They can get in touch with us on our Facebook page, or they can get in touch with us on our email. That's iomclothnappynetwork@gmail.com.
Jo, would you? I mean, I know you're not planning on having any more children.
Oh no, don't! But... I've just got really broody. I cannot believe it, Beth. I was sat in what we call our green room before, and looking at these nappies, and they're so soft, and they're like little teddy bear bums. It's just the cutest things, and I can imagine actually if I was to have a baby, I don't think I will. I would actually look at this as an alternative to obviously disposable nappies. I have to say, I got into a really good discussion there about poo with these lovely ladies, just to bring the tone down in the interview completely. But because I was really fascinated by. Let's get down to basics. Our babies really do throw up the most revolting things. Like if they have too many blueberries, I've had that. It creates quite a lot of mess down below. And it can be quite runny as well. And so putting this directly into the washing machine just made me a little bit squirmish. I was thinking, does it come out? What happens? But you put me right there, didn't you?
Yeah. Going into the detail of it, obviously when a baby is new, anybody who's got a newborn knows that it's pretty loose, and there's no solids.
Hope nobody's eating.
Sorry. There's no solids to speak of. So when you put it in your washing machine, you do a pre-wash, and what that does is add loads of water to it, and it literally washes it away down the pipe. Nobody has a problem with washing a baby's clothes when they've had a leak in a disposable nappy. So you're putting poo in your washing machine anyway. Most people do.
And you told me that did you know this? In the small writing on the disposable nappies, that apparently you're supposed to throw the solid waste down the loo first before you throw the nappy away.
Oh, do you not do that?
Do you know what? I can't believe after all these years I never did that. I feel terrible.
I don't
after
think
finding
many
that
people
out.
do
I
that.
cannot believe we're having this conversation.
I know, I'm sorry.
We asked Women Today listeners what they'd like you to talk about this afternoon, and the subject of mental health has come up time and time again in the correspondence we've received. So let's just start this off by asking, very simplistically, I guess, what it is to have good mental health and how it differs to physical well-being.
I think there are a number of factors that we see as being indicators of good mental health. I think one is a resilience to being able to cope well with life's events. And there isn't any two ways about this. Everybody will have unpleasant, significantly distressing events in your lives, deaths, broken marriages, loss of children. So those sort of events, and it's how well you're able to cope with those and cope with everyday life. Secondly, there's the ability to be flexible, to be able to take that as it comes. So that's part of resilience, but it's actually an identifiable factor that's different. And flexibility then means that you can take what comes your way, but also manage it and continue to move forward. So good mental health will have probably a sense of humour. It will have an ability to be flexible. It will have an ability to be resilient, and it'll have an ability to take things and life in its stride, good and bad.
Now, are mental health issues really on the rise, or are we just hearing more about them? Do we just know more about them these days?
Well, it's a very good question, and there is some evidence that in certain sectors of the population, it is probably the case that mental health problems are definitely on the rise, and that applies to young people in particular. For example, the latest statistics suggest that 1 in 5 school-age children have serious enough psychiatric or psychological symptoms as to warrant a psychiatric diagnosis, and that's a much, much higher figure than would have pertained 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Now, is that because we have better ways of picking up the disorder, or are children more extrovert, as they definitely are, in terms of being exhibiting or speaking out about their problems? There's probably an element of truth of all of that, but the research indicates there really is a genuine rise in child mental health problems. And one theory about that is, it may be more stressful to be a child today because, for example, we're talking about social media, and, for example, body image disorders are much more likely to be a problem for young women than it would have been 30 years ago. The other thing is, and I know we'll always enter controversial and politically sensitive territory with psychology and psychiatry, but another theory is the breakdown of the nuclear family, which is there's a much higher divorce rate, that both parents are often outside of the home more than before in terms of working, and there's something about the breakdown of family structure that a lot of people are arguing explains why there's a dramatic rise in child mental health issues.
It can't be healthier, though, to stay in a bad marriage.
I completely agree. I wasn't saying that you should, but what I'm saying is that there's something about family structure people argue is a problem. I actually fully agree. I do a lot of couple therapy, and often I say to people it's better to get divorced rather than have an acrimonious and terrible family atmosphere at home. However, it may be that there's a worse family atmosphere at home in general in our era than there was 50 or 60 years ago, whether people are divorced or staying together. And there's an interesting question as to why that might be.
Now, we talked on the programme yesterday about the rise in emotional health problems in young girls specifically. There was a study which followed 1,900. They interviewed them in 2009 and then again 5 years later. I just wonder, is there a simple answer to this? How do you bring young people up to be emotionally resilient?
Again, it's a very good question, but certainly coping skills, how to cope with stress, will be an important element of that. It's very important to pick up on one of the things that Helen was pointing out, which is it's not the fact that you experience stress that means you have a mental health issue. Everyone's going to experience stress. Everyone's going to experience setbacks. It's your ability to cope and be resilient in the face of that. So coping skills, and we can talk a little bit later about what those might be, but there's a very important distinction to make between happiness and resilience. Resilience is something's bad's happened to you, but you fight on and you are staying relatively stable in the face of distress. Happiness is not about whether bad things have happened to you or good things have happened to you and your ability to cope with that. It's just a general sense of feeling good about life. It would actually be not great mental health to be happy in some circumstances. Some people taking illegal drugs, for example, are very happy at that moment. Does that mean they have great mental health? Probably not.
Now, let's just turn to some of the specific questions from listeners. We've got quite a few to go to. Belinda asked if there's any evidence of a correlation between mums working full-time in addition to the roles and rigours expected and associated with family life and an increase in stress and other mental health issues. And you kind of referred to that already.
Does she mean mental health issues in the woman or in the
I assume she
children?
means in the woman.
Right. No, there's no evidence that the secret to well-being for women is to stay at home or go out to work. It depends on the woman. But what I do think is a woman should feel that she's exercising her choice, her preference, and that she should be supported in that. One of the clear findings from the research is that women's well-being is much more intimately linked to support from a partner than often it is the case with men. Men tend to come to a clinic stressed because of some problems happening at work. Women are much more affected by how their relationship is going in general. So whatever a woman has chosen to do, stay at home or go to work, support from a partner, I think, is crucial in that decision.
Kate contacted us to ask for tips for keeping well mentally. I mean, let's talk about some of those coping mechanisms. And she especially refers to if a close family member is suffering from a specific problem, maybe an eating disorder, how do you make sure that you personally don't make that situation for them worse?
But certainly you need to do a thing that we call information gathering. Gather information about it. You can go on the web and find high quality sources of information. So, for example, there's a thing called the Eating Disorders Association. There's an excellent book published by a professor of eating disorders called Getting Better Bite by Bite, which is also a very good guide to helping people with eating disorders. So gather information, and then there are things that you can do to help support someone, but it's often about trying to find out what the underlying issue is. Someone just doesn't have a body image disorder. What usually has happened is they've got low self-esteem, something's happened to them that they've become concerned about, and supporting them with that. But encouraging them to get professional help, going with them to a therapist or to professional help is often a good idea as well.
Interesting one here. Siobhan asks, which is better for mental health, having children or not?
Well, again, the research evidence is that more and more women are choosing not to have children, and I think the issue isn't whether you have children or not. The issue is what is your preference, what is your choice. If for some reason you're having children and it wasn't your choice, that's not going to be good. That seems to be the core issue. And again, I think it should be seen as a choice. I don't think everyone is naturally cut out to be a parent. So I think that's a big mistake that a lot of people make.
Okay, a text in from Susie. Can I ask if having suffered severe depression, which was event-led, are you then prone to depression or has the medication cured that illness?
Again, this is an excellent question. The evidence is that if you get good treatment for your depression, and frankly speaking, a lot of people recover from depression without getting good treatment because they follow the correct coping skills, it is entirely possible you won't get depressed again. However, if you've had a serious bout of depression, it's gone on for a long time and you didn't get the right treatment, you are more prone to relapses in the future. And one of the early indicators of a relapse is something like a change in your appetite, a change in your sleep. I know we're going to be talking about that later on. So spotting early indicators and intervening fast and early is crucial, particularly with depression.
Our guest this afternoon is Nige Kane, who after being in the RAF, being a milkman and a stay-at-home dad, even though he didn't realise he was one, but we've told him he was, he now helps people manage their pooches, including our very own Joe.
Absolutely. He's my dog trainer. And it's really helped
me out. Not
training
you, obviously, but
I
that's
did say dog.
That's what I'm really interested in, Nige. When it comes to dog training, who are you training, the dog or the owner?
Everybody asks that question.
I suppose it's both, though, really, isn't it?
Well, it is. Certainly with the work that I do. First of all, I'm not a classical dog trainer, so I don't run classes in church halls, and we don't do heel, sit down, stay, and come, and all these things, which are great to do with your dog, but that's the people better placed than me to do that. I deal with dogs that have behaviour problems, or certainly behaviours that owners want to change, and usually the owners, of course, have created those behaviours.
We're looking at Jo here. She's nodding.
It's so true, because I have anxiety around the behaviour of my dog. Therefore, they pick up on that. So it's my anxiety that needs to be looked at. Wouldn't you agree, Nige?
Yes, I do agree. But it's about understanding your dogs. And that's where, as a society, for years and years and years, we've kind of... I mean, when I was a young when I was a kid, people like me didn't exist. You wouldn't be aware that there was someone that would come to your house and deal with badly behaved dogs. As I say, you could go and do dog training classes because I did them and I loved them. But more and more now, we live in a faster moving society. We're different with our dogs. How dogs didn't die out over the last 40 years when we just used to feed them tins of dog food instead of these incredibly expensive sacks of veterinary improved, scientifically formulated dog food and things. So we do treat our dogs very much differently now, like we treat everything differently, and I don't think it does our dogs any good.
I'm really interested in something you said earlier in the programme, talking about personalities of dogs and temperaments, because I mean, for many people, I suppose, who don't have a dog of their own, they just think, well, a dog's a dog, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good point, Beth, and it's one of those debates that rages on things like dog training forums. You know, scientists and ethologists are very uncomfortable with the idea that a dog has a personality, because personality kind of says that the dog can attach complex emotions to its feelings or to its thoughts, and largely the understanding is that they can't. So certainly dogs do have temperaments, and they have different temperaments. You have dogs that are easier to get on with, dogs that seem to be more friendly, dogs that are more suspicious than others. So yes, they have a temperament. It might even be a personality. It's only a word at the end of the day. But it's kind of understanding that largely with our dogs, the reason we tie ourselves in knots is because we actually overestimate them. We assume that because we have opposing thumbs and we stand upright, that we just tell our dog what to do and he just understands. And quite often you can be actually giving a very different message from the one that you want to give.
Now, they do say that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I've heard that somewhere. Is it something that needs to be done when the animal's very young?
Well, that's what it's like. It's like educating children. It's better when they're young. The saying about old dogs and new tricks, it actually just comes from dogs like us. Once they get older, things start to break down and they get degenerative brain disease and things like that. So it's harder for them to learn and harder for them to take things on board. But no, it really isn't ever kind of too late to put things into practice.
Now, Susie, I mean, you've had dogs in the past, and
Always,
what do you think about this whole idea of a personality or a temperament in your dog?
Absolutely. We were talking the other day about my dad being at Peel, and there's a gentleman there that goes around with his dog, and to see people who've obviously got problems, mental and otherwise, with these dogs, just the benefits, if you know what I mean. The stress seems to just sort of fade away, and they cuddle the dog, and I just find it very difficult to be without a dog, which I am at the moment, and trying hard to cope with it. But they are all very, very different. I think, Nigel, you would agree there, and it's a case of understanding them, really, isn't it?
Absolutely, and you don't have to be able to understand every dog. You just have to appreciate that actually you can't use necessarily the same standard method to train all dogs.
Absolutely,
in the same way that you wouldn't, teachers don't use the same teaching thing to teach all children. Some children learn better at the time. Some learn better from study outside and things.
But it's easier with children, though, isn't it? Because they can talk back to you.
Absolutely.
I mean, how do you communicate with dogs then, Nigel?
Well, it's a good thing. When I was a young man, I used to make lots of money in pubs and bars. People say, Nigel, what do I do about my dog? And they'd say, he won't do this. And I would say, well, I could make your dog do that without even giving him a command. And they go, no, you couldn't. And I go, and invariably you'd end up with your £20 or whatever. Because if you went anywhere, if you went to the pub or to the school and said to children, okay, write down on a piece of paper how dogs communicate. And very quickly on the list you'll get they bark, they growl, they whimper, they whine, they wag their tail and all these things. And yes, they are all forms of communication. 80-90% of dogs' communication is through body language, and actually they look at facial expression very clearly, which is why sometimes you will get dogs that are uneasy of people with hoods up or with sunglasses on because they can't see their facial expression, and that's important if you're a dog. You look at body language very clearly.
That's astounding, actually, because I used to give my dog dirty looks if he'd been really bad, and he'd really, Mum doesn't love me anymore.
One of the first things that Nigel said to me was, dogs don't understand English. So if my dog is barking because someone's come to the door, and immediately I go, shh, or enough, he could say to me, you're saying to that dog, go on, keep going, keep barking. So that's one of the first things you said to me is enough talking. Do it through body language, and that's the best way to control it. And ignore.
If, as you're so good with dogs, do you think
Thank you.
you can translate that? Sorry,
Into English.
oh dear. Does that translate to people? Do you think you're quite good at reading people?
Well, that is one of the things you can be. I mean, some of the best dog handlers I've seen, can be children and young people. You can be very good. We have lots of people every year go to Crufts from the island and are brilliant and do wonderful things with their dogs. If you can't transfer that, if you can't explain to people why that works, it's all very well good turning up and showing off and getting the dog to behave beautifully and then going, okay, see you next week. And if you can't transfer that to people, you're no good to them. So I guess the 10 years I spent when I first came to the island after the milkman job, youth working, and when I studied for my degree, we did sociology and psychology and things like that. So you have to be able to explain to people why that works. You can't just show them, because people go, oh yeah, that's very impressive, but how can I do that?
Yeah.
So you need to be able to get people to be able to do it themselves.
I was with my friend yesterday and she was telling me that her dog's got depression and that the dog actually has been recommended Prozac for it.
Go on.
Yes, for real. I mean, is this common?
I think it's more common than we think.
Doggy depression, really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things, dogs do suffer from most of the illnesses we suffer from. And what, talking about, Susie was saying earlier about, owning dogs, sometimes we think, why has my dog just behaved like that today? And of course, dogs can just have a headache. We don't think about that. Dogs can have hay fever and things like that, and they can just feel a bit off that day, and it affects their behaviour in the same way it affects our behaviour. So, this is one of the things. I mean, I read and read and read and read about dogs. I have hundreds and hundreds of books, and I'm still learning. The things that totally changed the way I behave around dogs. So yeah.
Something you have been doing over the past few years is caring for your dad. What was the situation there?
Well, my father, when my mother died, which was 11 years ago, my father had Parkinson's disease and with the associated Alzheimer's, which came on a little bit later on. Well, it wasn't just me, thank heavens, it was my brother Sam and Noni, his wife. We were like the Three Musketeers, for 10 years we were there every day, 2 or 3 times, we did all the shopping and the cooking and all the rest of it, just so that he could have his independence, which was, still very, very important to him. To say it didn't alter my life would be a lie, because it did. It took it over. And I have 3 absolutely gorgeous grandchildren who I wanted to spend more time with, and it kind of limited that as well. And without trying hard not to, a little bit of resentment pops in, and it was pretty difficult. But towards the end of his life, he had another fall, and this time it was it was a pretty sort of bad one, so he was in hospital for about 3 weeks. And deteriorated very, very badly. So, in fact, for the last 7 months of his life, he was at the Castleview nursing home in Peel. I can't speak highly enough of them. They were absolutely fantastic. They are such a fabulous bunch up there. But we couldn't do anything because he was, there's nowhere else. There's very few places on the island that have dedicated dementia wings. Cool, this nose is getting worse, isn't it? And that proved to be the best place. In fact, it was, without doubt. But Jude knows all about that because she's not in the same position, but a similar position. So, I'm sure she could give you a few pointers.
Well, I'm listening to what you're saying, Susie, and of course I knew, because we've been friends for quite a while. I knew of your circumstance, and I think the thing that I would like to say straight away is that, and I think you would agree with me, that I do not regard myself as a carer. I think the carers are the people at Castleview and all the other nursing homes on the island, and the people who work for the agencies who come into homes and provide care, nursing care, and the district nurses. They're the ones that I think, now I'm talking purely personally here, they're the people that I look upon as carers, who will go into any situation and deal with the person with love and respect as though they were a member of their family. Now, what you and I have done is family. I mean, I am caring for my mother at the moment. She's 96. She's housebound and very, very frail. I cared also for my father. I should say that and you have to get a little smile out of these things. My parents split up in 1969. They're wonderful people, but just not for each other. They should never, ever have married each other. And so I've been very involved in both of their lives, but they were not together. But ironically, they both ended up living on the Isle of Man, a couple of miles from each other. And ironically, my father spent the last 14 months of his life in my spare room with my mother living next door.
You couldn't write the book,
and
could you?
really couldn't. But anyway, but the reason, why am I saying this? I'm saying this because I am lucky that I am in a position that I can care for them. I could care for my father. He died 18 months ago, still at home. He did not have any of these dreadfully disabling diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. He died of old age, and he died in just exactly the way that the medical profession predicted that would happen. He suddenly dropped dead. I am lucky that I was able to keep my family together and to provide the care. So, you know, but I don't regard myself as a carer.
But it's interesting, Jude, despite the way that you see yourself, there must be things that you have had to forego, to give up, to not do because of the position you're in.
Yeah, there are. And do you know how there's two ways of coping. You don't think about the things that you can't do. Think about the things that you can do. You can't, because if you sit there thinking about what you can't do, Susie, would you agree with me?
Absolutely.
You know, what you do then is you get yourself into it affects your own state of mind, and then you go into the bedroom and you take it out on the person that you're caring for. So you don't let yourself think about what you can do. And for me, and I'm not just saying that because I'm here now, the thing that keeps me going is being able to come out and be involved in the radio station. And I couldn't do that without the help of my colleagues. And they know who they are, and I'm not going to embarrass anybody by mentioning them, but they know who they are, who when I get into a fix, they'll say, can I give you a hand with that? And that's what puts the balance for me. And I'm not a saint, and I do get cross, and I do get frustrated, and I do feel like I look out of the window and I think, I'd like to be on that ferry, and I'd like to run away. You know, but don't think about what you can't do. And I know that there are maybe thousands of people like Susie and myself. I wish they were listening to this programme now, but I know that there are loads of people on this island who are doing this.
And it's interesting, though, I struggle with the fact that you say that you're not a carer, because we've had people from caring charities in here saying that you too are exactly the people that they are trying to reach out to, that they're trying to support, because you're doing so much on your own without real regard for yourself at many times.
Yeah, and again, this is something that I'm sure, Susie, you would agree with me. I'm not scorning or rejecting any help. I never reject help, and I had loads of assistance with my father. I would never have been able to cope. The district nurses were superb, absolutely superb. They have this way of talking to you, and they hear what you're not saying rather than what you are saying. And they say, I tell you what we're going to do next. You know, they're just so skilled. But you see, in the case of my mother has always been a very introverted person. She doesn't want anybody over the threshold. Now, those kind of, how you are as a person, you know, several years back, it's not going to change when you're 96, and I have to respect that. But I don't feel neglected or unsupported. It's just that I think we need to look for support in the way that is appropriate to each of us.
Susie, what has life then been like since your father's death?
Well, it's a little bit strange, actually, because I've been so used to being very, I suppose, knowing what I'm doing. You know, get up in the morning, blah, 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 blah. And the similar thing happened. I mean, it sounds a bit silly, but when I had the dog, you know, I always took the dog at certain times of the day. He was my priority. Dad was my priority as well as the dog for a while, and then the dog went, and then there was just Dad. But you see, Jude is an only child, and, you know, I had my brother and my sister-in-law, and we were like the Three Musketeers, so it was shared. But I have found that I'm sort of saying no, I can't do things or go places, or if I get an invite, I go no, and I prevaricate like mad, because I think, well, I've got to go to see Dad, and suddenly I think, no, you don't have to do that now.
It's really interesting, Joe. I don't know whether you've even given this any thought, and please God, it's a long way off, but do you think it's a thing that you could do, care for your parents?
I don't know if I'm absolutely honest about it. My parents are both really very independent people, and I'm smiling because I know Susie knows my parents very well, and they always have been. And I'm not quite sure if my father and I, if he'd let me care for him, I think he'd run away to the other side of the world rather than let any of us care for him. My mother, I really could imagine caring for. I think my father just wouldn't expect me to do that.
You see, I won't have a problem if anything goes wrong with me, because my dear son will have me euthanized immediately. You know, off you go. Bye!
That was a look back at some of the highlights from Women Today this week. And if you missed any of the programmes, you can listen to them again in full on manxradio.com.